Hello and welcome to this broadcast by Brexit Watch. I'm your host, Jonathan Saxty. Today we are delighted to welcome back to Brexit Watch the leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage. Nigel, welcome back to Brexit Watch.
Thank you.
Nigel, since the last time we spoke, obviously we've heard about the launch or relaunch of the Brexit Party becoming Reform UK. I've spoken to your colleague Richard Tice on this channel. My first question, Nigel, is why now? Why is Reform UK needed right now?
Well, look, I mean, even last year, I was saying that once Brexit is done, in whatever form, there is going to be a need for some fundamental change in British politics, genuine reform in British politics. And in a sense, Brexit is the first step. Because Brexit makes us free. Well, now we're free. Well, we don't quite know the final details. I've no doubt we'll come on to that. But once we are free to make decisions, be that over vaccines or how we manage fish stocks or whatever else it may be, we want to have a government that works, a system that we have confidence in. And don't forget that the Brexit Party's key slogan was change politics for good. So we always saw Brexit as being the first stepping stone in this direction. Why now? Well, look, I have no doubt that the transition period is going to end on the 31st of December. And even if there are some big battles to fight in the years to come, and if Boris does a bad deal, we'll be talking about ECJ oversight. If Boris does a bad deal, we'll be talking about the ability of British governments to make strategic investments in British industry. If Boris does a bad deal, I've no doubt our coastal communities will be screaming and screaming. But we still, even if it's a bad Brexit, Brexit will be done, at least for now. So I think the timing of this is right. So what we've done is we've put an application in to the Electoral Commission asking for our name to be changed to Reform UK. And now they've got 6 weeks to respond to us, and we're now at the end of week 5. So we're quite close to getting a verdict from Elcom. I mean, I can't see any reason on earth why they would refuse us, but that's where we are.
Nigel, I want to speak a bit more about the immediate term for Reform UK, but taking the situation in the UK right now, since we last spoke, how would you assess the situation right now? We've obviously had the second sort of quasi-national lockdown. We've had very recent announcement about this Pfizer vaccine. What's your overall take on how things stand right now in the UK?
Well, look, I think we've been through one of the worst years of government any of us have ever experienced in our lives. In many ways, the pandemic has showed up just what's wrong with the country. Hopeless quangos that move at the speed of a snail, government decision-making based more on followership than it is based on leadership, U-turn after U-turn, and I'm afraid lockdown after lockdown, and a massive increase in state power and state control. A friend of mine last night went out into Borough Market in London, just by London Bridge. Amazing. There were 10 policemen in Borough Market going around the pubs, making sure people were having substantial meals, asking groups of people, were they all in the same bubble? I mean, is this what we've come to? And I talked to you today when in Wales, pubs will be banned from serving alcohol. I mean, we've got this relentless march of the Puritans. I mean, Cromwell must be looking down upon all of this with great glee, as every attempt for us to enjoy our lives or return to some normality is taken from us. Now, look, on the other side of that, some will say, look, Nigel, a lot of people are dying with this. I did say deliberately with this, not necessarily of this, because what is becoming clear is that many people go into hospital with quite serious medical conditions, contract COVID whilst they're in hospital, and then when they die, go down as COVID deaths. I'm not underplaying, the seriousness this virus represents to a certain number of people. I'm just not. But let me give you one example of where this is all going wrong. So Boris Johnson contracts COVID, as we all know, and got it very seriously, was lucky to come out the other side of it. He's one of 50 million people worldwide that has caught this virus. Of those 50 million, only a handful, literally a handful, have been proven to contract it for a second time. So we are pretty certain that once you've had this, you have T-cell immunity. We don't yet know how long that lasts. Boris Johnson met with a member of parliament 3 weeks ago. That member of, a brief meeting, a photograph. That MP subsequently tested positive for COVID-19. Boris, despite telling the world that he was bursting with antibodies, decided he had to self-isolate when there was actually a near mathematical impossibility that he could have contracted it and be a carrier for the second time. And then 5 days after the meeting, he had a test which was negative, and he still continued to self-isolate for a fortnight. Now that is not leadership. That, frankly, is cowardice. It's saying to the populace, you must obey the rules regardless. Well, I would have thought the whole point of a testing regime was to open the country up, not to keep it locked down. So that little episode for me sums up just how badly we've been governed and just what a total vacuum of leadership there is in British politics today.
Nigel, if you were in Boris Johnson's position now over the next sort of 6 to 12 months, looking specifically at the economy, what kind of policies would you be looking at, taking account of Brexit perhaps, but particularly on the economy, civil liberties too? What would you be looking to doing into 2021?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the economy, shall we? And let's start with the real division in British society today. People talk about racial divides, they talk about class divides. I'll tell you what the big divide is. It's the divide between the private sector and the public sector. And the way in which all over this country, we have national government that doesn't understand how the 6 million people that run their own businesses or act as sole traders operate. No comprehension from that front bench on how these things work. And then local councils, in many cases, making struggling small businesses' lives intolerable. I did a video this week about a pub in Barnes in southwest London, where, a pub trying to survive through lockdown, doing click and collect takeaways, and a guy comes up and says, give us a pint. You haven't clicked and collected. But my phone's broken. Just do us a favor this one time. The manager says, right, okay, I'll do it for you once, but never again. Serves him a pint, with a plastic lid on top as a takeaway. And out they produce their licensing officer's badge from Richmond Council. I've got another letter in this morning from a guy running a private hire business. And obviously for people like that, it's been a really, really tough time. He's survived. Many firms in his area have gone bust. So what he's tried to do is to employ more drivers, leaflet, old-fashioned leafleting and advertising to say, look, if you want to go to the airport or go somewhere, we're here. Waiting months to get new drivers registered because council offices are full, or they're asking question after question after question. At no level is the private sector, the small private sector in this country being helped. And I think my biggest economic fear is that's where the economic collapse is going to come. Because I think with the mindset we've got, not just from Boris, Michael Gove, goodness gracious me. Did you read his Apocalypse Now Times article last Saturday? They are so safety first with all of this. And yeah, sure, it's not an easy job being a government in a pandemic, but they're so safety first. If they're as efficient at getting the vaccine out as they've been with the 12 billion quid they've spent on test and trace, it's going to be a very, very long time before this vaccine gets out in sufficient quantities for them to feel able to get the country moving. And I'm afraid, and I don't want viewers to contemplate this, but I think they're going to have to. We're going to be locked down till Easter. I just don't see this government changing track. So economically, what I would do is to try and actually help the 6 million small entrepreneurs out there, because that's where you get growth from. That's where you get momentum in the economy. They're the people ultimately that provide a lot more private sector jobs than the giant multinationals who are part of the CBI, who continually try and tell us our fortune. So we've got to try and help these people. We've got to try and get that part of the economy moving. And that means a different approach to lockdown. And is it one that comes with some degree of risk? Well, yes, it is. But then has lockdown worked? Has lockdown really worked? We have got to have a different approach. We've got, I'm afraid, to learn to live with this virus, taking precautions. And I hate face masks and all the rest of it, but I accept, even I accept that's what we have to live with for now. On civil liberties, well, goodness me, how long have you got? I mean, I just never thought that we could so rapidly move into this Orwellian world. I mean, we had a period of time when we were literally being ruled by ministerial diktat with no oversight from Parliament whatsoever. Now, we have seen a few changes to that, albeit under pressure. But just the attitude of the authorities, the attitude of some of the police forces, the fact that they own Christmas. All the government say, you're allowed to meet your family at Christmas, as long as, of course, it's not from more than 3 households. So if you've got 4 kids, you've got a terribly difficult decision to make as to who you invite round on Christmas Day. I mean, but it's this whole idea. They own Christmas. They own our freedom. And they're going to give us a few days when we can get together and celebrate Christmas. And I just feel that is all the wrong way round. And the problem with this, of course, is that history shows that government in crises, be it war or whatever else it is, are very good at taking power for themselves, but very much less good at giving it back when those crises are over. So that I think there are some real long-term ongoing battles to be fought here.
Nigel, when you were talking about the economy, I couldn't help but think that breaking free from the EU, getting out from under EU rules in terms of state aid, level playing field, really is what the UK needs right now, to have the full latitude to really go for growth, to deregulate, to help the small and medium-sized enterprises, as you say. So focusing on Brexit, where do you think things stand there? We're coming right up to the wire now. We know that Michel Barnier is in London. We hear a lot of noise, that's suggestions that there are problems still as they go right to the wire. What's your take there?
Don't read the newspapers. You're wasting your time. They know more. They know more about this than you do sitting at home. Is there going to be a deal? Is there going to be a deal over the course of the next few days? And bear in mind that the last European Council of the year, comes next Thursday. Bear in mind that whatever gets agreed is going to need to be looked at by national governments, got to be translated, all the rest of it. Bear in mind that the European Parliament, my former home, has an absolutely crucial role in this, according to the European treaties. I mean, they actually have the right to veto this. So I guess it is possible that negotiations go on right up until Christmas. But I think realistically, we are pretty much now on last knockings of all of this. And if you put me up against a wall and say what's going to happen, I think there will be a deal. And I suspect that it's a deal that will be sold by the Prime Minister as the most extraordinary victory. Rather like John Major coming back from Maastricht, game, set and match to the British. Well, it wasn't, but that's the way that governments try and portray things. David Cameron tried that trick too. He came back in December 15 and said, look at this marvelous deal, only to have it rubbished. Yeah. On fishing, let me tell you what's really important. What's really important isn't directly what the share is next year of the catches, important though that is. What's important is who is making that decision. Because when Barnier said to us a few days ago, oh, we can afford to give you another 15 to 18% of the stocks in British waters. No, no, no. Brexit is about people like you not telling us how to live our lives and telling us what to do. We voted to get away from foreign bureaucrats, offering us crumbs from the table. So in a way, provided the principle's accepted, that it's the British that make these decisions, we can afford to be generous to the French for a period of time. Well, when I say generous, I mean, I don't think they should go on getting 90% of the haddock in the southwestern approaches, all right? Some changes are needed. So that's what to look for on fishing. When it comes to the European Court of Justice, well, the signals aren't good here, because Barnier himself this week has said that the UK have accepted the EU's human rights regime, and that means we will stay within the European Convention on Human Rights, and it means we will stay with the European Court of Human Rights, still having the power and the legitimacy to overrule our own Supreme Court. Now that, there's been no confirmation of that from Boris, but that's what Barnier says. So if we're going in that direction, I'm worried about, the other European court, the one that is more directly under the EU. I'm worried about that. And look, on level playing fields and state aid, if we are not free to make our own legislation in every area of our commercial life in this country, then it's not a proper Brexit. And it's just as simple as that. So my fear is a deal gets done, gets presented as a victory, but actually we find ourselves with Brexit, but still too closely tied to EU rules. That is my fear. And I think the American elections have had a big impact on this, because, had Trump still been seen to be there, well, at least there was a friend there who wanted to have a trade deal. With the prospect of Biden coming in, we have somebody who's a globalist, somebody who loves the EU, hates Brexit, and supports Irish nationalism. And I think that's put Boris into a feeling that he doesn't want to look friendless on both sides of the Atlantic. So look, let's wait and see. What is interesting is this. Everyone thinks Brexit's gone away. No one cares anymore about Brexit. Brexit's gone away. We can get away with a bit of a sellout. Some interesting polling out overnight suggesting that the Red Wall would much prefer a no deal. The Red Wall would much prefer a clean break. And you know what? Right now, I'm going to return to a phrase that I coined about 10 days before the referendum in 2016. I did it after a long meeting with economists for Brexit. And we talked about this scenario. What if they won't give us a deal? And no deal is better than a bad deal. No deal is better than a bad deal was the phrase then. It's still the phrase now. I would rather have some short-term disruption knowing that we're genuinely free. But I just don't think the Prime Minister has got the bottle to do that. If he does, do you know what? I'll forgive everything else and he'll be a hero.
But presumably if he doesn't, Nigel, as you said to me last time, you won't. And although Reform UK is moving away from the Brexit Party, if there is a bad deal, if there is a fudge, if there is a compromise, how will Reform UK tackle that or kind of fold that into their reform agenda?
Well, if there's a sellout on fishing, then Reform UK can campaign in every seaside town in England and put up candidates for local elections and national elections. I mean, these aren't two separate compartments.
No.
This is all part of the same thing.
Yeah. And in the immediate term, Nigel, what is your major concerns and your major hopes, both for the country and for Reform UK?
Well, being here in Kent in Tier 3, getting the pubs open, that's what I'm really concerned about. Look, I'm hoping we get either no deal or a good deal from Brexit. But above everything, I'm going to repeat the point I made earlier. We need to spare a thought for the 6 million men and women out there that have gone out on their own, borrowed money from banks, taken risk, don't get holidays. These people really matter in our country. Many of them have been completely left out by the Chancellor's packages. Not all, but many of them have. Directors, for example, of small limited companies, many of them have not received government handouts. And we somehow have to think about how we close this gap that is emerging in Britain between the private and public sector, because going on from here, that is a real problem. You can't borrow your way out of the worst financial crisis for 300 years. You can't tax your way out of the worst financial crisis for 300 years. You have to grow your way out. So in a sense, the opportunity of Brexit couldn't have come at a better time.
Cheers to that. I think that probably brings us to the end of the interview. So Nigel Farage, thank you for your time, and here's hopefully to a good Christmas.
Absolutely.